He walked into the overcrowded VA hospital like he owned the building. His uniform pressed his rank on display, and his patience at 0. Commander Brock Holloway was used to giving orders and having them followed without question. So when a tired middle-aged nurse with graying hair told him to take a number and wait his turn, he didn't just get angry, he got cruel. He mocked her, threatened her job, and treated her like the dirt beneath his boots. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know that under her scrub top, etched into her skin, was a tattoo that only the most hardened survivors of Fallujah recognized. He was about to learn that rank is worn on the collar, but heroism is inked in blood. Rain lashed against the reinforced glass of the sliding doors at the Oakhaven Veterans Medical Center. It was a miserable Tuesday night in November, the kind of weather that made old shrapnel wounds ache and phantom limbs burn. The waiting room was a sea of misery, coughing veterans huddled in worn coats, exhausted families clutching styrofoam cups of lukewarm coffee, and the constant rhythmic beeping of the triage monitors. At the center of the chaos stood head nurse Beatrice Connors. Beatrice was 56 years old, though the deep lines etched around her eyes and the permanent set of her jaw made her look older. She wore navy blue scrubs that had been washed 100 times, and her hair was pulled back in a severe, practical bun. To the casual observer, she looked like just another bureaucrat in the endless machinery of the healthcare system, slow, tired, and unremarkable. She was currently trying to calm down Mr. Henderson, a Vietnam vet having a flashback near the vending machines. "It's just the thunder, Earl," Beatrice said, her voice a low, grounding rumble. She placed a hand on his trembling shoulder. "You're in Oakhaven. You're safe. I've got the perimeter." Earl blinked, his eyes clearing. "You got the perimeter, B. Locked down tight," she lied smoothly. "Go sit by the radiator. Warm those bones." As Earl shuffled away, the automatic doors hissed open, admitting a gust of freezing wind and 3 men. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Leading the group was Commander Brock Holloway. He was a man carved from granite, and arrogance his Marine Corps service uniform, immaculate despite the weather. He was young for his rank, perhaps late 30s, with the sharp, predatory gaze of a man who had climbed the ladder by stepping on fingers. Flanking him were 2 younger officers, Lieutenant Silas and Sergeant Reed. Holloway held a bloody towel to his forearm. It wasn't a catastrophic wound, but the blood had stained his pristine cuff, and that clearly irritated him more than the pain. Beatrice watched them approach the front desk. The young intake clerk, a girl named Jenny, who had only been working there for 2 months, looked up with wide, terrified eyes. "I need a doctor. Now." Holloway barked, not asking, but announcing. Yes, sir." Jenny stammered, reaching for a clipboard. "If you could just fill out these forms, we can get you into the triage queue. The wait time is currently about 4 hours. Holloway laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. He slammed his uninjured hand onto the counter, making the stapler jump. "I don't think you hear me, sweetheart. I am Commander Brock Holloway. I am due at a briefing at the Pentagon in 6 hours. I do not sit in waiting rooms with—" He gestured vaguely at the room full of coughing, limping veterans. "With the general population. I need sutures, a tetanus shot, and antibiotics. And I need them 5 minutes ago." Jenny looked like she was about to cry. The waiting room had gone silent. Dozens of eyes fixed on the commander. Beatrice sighed. She adjusted her glasses, checked the IV bag on a passing gurney, and then walked deliberately toward the front desk. Her gait was slightly uneven. A limp she usually hid well, but the damp weather was making her left leg scream. She stepped between Jenny and the commander. Jenny, go check on Mrs. Gable's vitals in bed 4, Beatrice said softly. Jenny fled, grateful for the escape. Beatrice turned her attention to Halloway. She didn't look up at him with awe. She looked at him over the rim of her spectacles like he was a misbehaving child who had tracked mud onto a clean carpet. "Name?" she asked Penn, hovering over the clipboard. Halloway stared at her, blinking as if he couldn't believe her audacity. "Did you not hear me? I am a commander in the United States Marine Corps." "I heard you, fine commander," Beatrice said, her voice flat. "But unless that cut on your arm severed an artery which, judging by the fact that you're screaming at my staff, it didn't, you are a code green. That means non-life-threatening. That means you wait." She pointed the pen toward the rows of plastic chairs. "Take a seat. We'll call you." Halloway's face turned a shade of crimson that clashed with his uniform. He leaned over the counter, invading her personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and rain. "Listen to me, you dried-up little clerk," Halloway hissed, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "I command a battalion of the finest warriors on God's green earth. I have men under my command who have done more for this country before breakfast than you have done in your entire miserable, paper-pushing life. You will find a doctor, and you will treat me, or I will have your job. I'll have you scrubbing toilets in a detention center by morning." Beatrice didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She just looked at the cut on his arm. "It's a laceration, probably from a piece of metal or glass," she diagnosed calmly. "Keep pressure on it. If you bleed through the towel, come tell me. Otherwise, sit down." She turned her back on him. It was the ultimate insult. Halloway lunged, grabbing her shoulder and spinning her around. "Don't you turn your back on me!" he roared. The waiting room gasped. 2 older vets in wheelchairs started to rise, their instincts kicking in. But Beatrice held up a hand to stop them. She looked down at Halloway's hand on her shoulder, then up at his eyes. Her gaze was ice cold. "Touch me again," Beatrice whispered, "and you'll be eating your meals through a straw. Commander, let go." For a second, the violence in the air was palpable. Lieutenant Silas, standing behind Halloway, looked nervous. He stepped forward, putting a hand on Halloway's back. "Sir," Silas murmured, "there are cameras, civilians watching. Let's just sit." Halloway released her, shoving her slightly as he did. He straightened his jacket, regaining his composure, but keeping the sneer on his face. "Fine," Halloway spat. "I'll wait, but I'm making a call. You're finished here." He stormed over to the corner of the waiting room, his subordinates trailing him like nervous puppies. Beatrice smoothed her scrub top, took a deep breath, and went back to work. But the tension didn't dissipate. Halloway spent the next hour making loud phone calls clearly intended for Beatrice to hear. He complained about the incompetence and the disrespect of the staff. He glared at every nurse who walked by. Beatrice ignored him, but she was busy. The ER was understaffed as always. Dr. Kagan was in surgery with a car crash victim, and Dr. Ross was handling a cardiac arrest in the back. That left Beatrice running the floor. She moved from patient to patient with an efficiency that bordered on mechanical. She changed dressings, administered pain meds, and soothed fears. Around 10:00 p.m., a commotion at the doors drew everyone's attention again. Paramedics burst in, pushing a gurney. "We got a John Doe, approximately 25 years old motorcycle accident," the lead paramedic shouted. "Massive trauma to the right leg. Arterial bleed tension, pneumothorax. He's crashing." Beatrice was there in a second. "Bay 1, get a line in. Jenny Page Ross, Tell him to get her down here, now." "Ross is still with the cardiac," Jenny cried. "Then get me the crash cart," Beatrice yelled, running alongside the gurney. As they passed Halloway, the commander stood up, blocking the path. "Hey," Halloway shouted. "I've been waiting an hour. My arm is throbbing. You're taking this junkie biker in before me." The patient on the gurney was covered in mud and blood, his leather jacket shredded. He was gasping for air, his chest heaving unevenly. Beatrice didn't even slow down. She shoulder-checked the commander, knocking him back into his seat with surprising force. "Move, or get run over." She vanished behind the curtain of Bay 1. Halloway stood up, furious. "That is it. I am filing a formal complaint right now." He marched toward the intake desk, terrifying Jenny again. Inside Bay 1, it was a war zone. The young man on the table was dying. The monitor was screaming a high-pitched warning. "Beep, beep, beep, beep. BP is dropping. 60 over 40, the paramedic shouted. "We're losing him." Beatrice looked at the patient's chest. It was deviated. His lung had collapsed, and the pressure was crushing his heart. He needed a chest tube instantly. But the doctors were occupied. "Where is Cargan?" Beatrice snapped. "Still in surgery." The young man's eyes rolled back. He stopped thrashing. Beatrice knew the protocol. Nurses were not supposed to perform surgical procedures. It was outside her scope of practice in a civilian hospital. If she did this and messed up, she would go to prison. If she did this and succeeded, she would lose her license. But if she did nothing, the boy died in 30 seconds. She looked at the boy's arm. Amidst the road rash, she saw a tattoo. Semper Fi. He was a Marine. Beatrice's face hardened. The tired, middle-aged nurse vanished. Something else took her place. Something ancient and dangerous. "Hand me the scalpel and the 36 French tube," she ordered, her voice cutting through the panic like a razor blade. "B, you can't," Jenny whispered, horrified. "You'll get fired." "I said hand me the damn scalpel," Beatrice roared. Jenny fumbled and handed it over. Outside the curtain, Halloway was leaning over the desk, screaming at the administrative supervisor who had just come downstairs. "I want her name, and I want her badge number. She assaulted a superior officer," Halloway was yelling. Sudden silence fell over the ER as a horrific guttural sound came from Bay 1, the sound of plastic tubing being forced through muscle and rib. Then a massive hiss of escaping air. Whoosh! The monitor, which had flatlined for a second, began to ping. Beep, beep, beep. Strong. Steady. Beatrice stepped out of the curtain 3 minutes later. Her hands were covered in bright red blood up to her wrists. She had blood splatter on her glasses. She looked exhausted, but the boy was alive. She walked to the sink near the nurse's station and began to scrub her hands. Halloway walked up behind her. He saw the blood. He grimaced in disgust. "Finally done playing hero with the drug addicts," Halloway sneered. "Now look at my arm. It's starting to swell." Beatrice didn't turn around. She kept scrubbing. The water turned pink as it swirled down the drain. "That drug addict," Beatrice said quietly, "is a Lance Corporal. He just came home last week. And he's alive because I just did a procedure you probably couldn't spell, let alone perform." Halloway laughed. "You please, you're a nurse. You change bedpans and hand out lollipops. Don't pretend you're on the front lines, lady. You have no idea what real pressure is. You have no idea what it's like to hold a man's life in your hands while the enemy is shooting at you." He leaned in close to her ear. "You are a civilian. You are soft, and you are incompetent. Beatrice turned off the water. She dried her hands with a paper towel slowly, methodically. She turned to face him. Soft, she repeated. Soft. Halloway confirmed. Now, are you going to treat me? Or do I need to call the general and have this place shut down? I'll treat you, Beatrice said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. Come with me to Bay 3. Let's get you stitched up so you can get out of my sight. She led him into the small examination bay. Halloway sat on the edge of the bed, looking smug. He felt he had won. He had bullied the staff into submission. About time, he muttered. Beatrice gathered the suture kit. She prepped the needle. As she worked, she rolled up the sleeves of her scrub top because the room was hot and the blood from the previous patient had soaked the cuffs. She rolled the right sleeve. Nothing but pale, scarred skin. Then she rolled the left sleeve. Halloway was looking at his phone, ignoring her. Make sure you use a small needle. I don't want a scar. You'll survive, Commander, Beatrice said. She finished rolling the left sleeve up to her shoulder. Halloway looked up to make a snide comment about her speed. His eyes traveled from her face down her neck to her left arm. He froze. There, covering her entire upper left arm, was a tattoo. But it wasn't a butterfly, or a flower, or a heart. It was a faded, intricate design in black and green ink. A skull wearing a helmet, crossed with two medical caduceus symbols wrapped in barbed wire. Beneath it, in bold Gothic lettering, were the words, 1st Battalion, 8th Marines. Operation Phantom Fury. The Devil's Dock, and below that a small, distinct list of dates and coordinates. Fallujah, 2004. Halloway's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He knew that unit. Every Marine knew that unit. The Battle of Fallujah was the bloodiest urban combat the Marines had seen since Vietnam, and the medics attached to the 1-8. They were legends. They were known as the Devil's Docks because they ran into hellfire to drag Marines out. But there was something else, a smaller tattoo just below the elbow, a silver star medal rendered in ink. Halloway stared. He looked at the grey-haired woman he had just called soft. He looked at the ink. He looked back at her face. Beatrice caught his stare. She didn't cover the arm. She just threaded the needle. Is there a problem, Commander? She asked. Halloway swallowed hard. Where did you get that? Get what? She asked, swabbing his arm with iodine. The tattoo, he whispered. The 1-8 Fallujah. Beatrice looked down at her own arm, as if she had forgotten it was there. Oh, that. Got it in a dirty parlor in Ramadi about 20 years ago. Cost me a pack of cigarettes and a bottle of whiskey. You were in Fallujah, Halloway's voice cracked. I was attached to Charlie Company. Beatrice said, her eyes focusing on his wound, her hands steady as rocks. Corpsman, 2004. Halloway felt the blood drain from his face. A female corpsman attached to an infantry unit in 2004 was rare, extremely rare. But to be with the 1/8th in the House of Hell, that made her a unicorn, a dangerous, battle-hardened unicorn. But, Halloway stammered, you're a nurse. I am now, she said. Back then I was the only thing standing between a lot of good boys and the Reaper. She pierced his skin with the needle. Halloway didn't even feel it. He was too busy processing the fact that he had just told a Silver Star recipient that she didn't know what pressure was. But Halloway was a proud man, and pride is a defensive mechanism. Instead of apologizing, his brain scrambled to find a way to stay in control. It had to be fake. That was it. It was stolen valor. She was an old lady. There was no way she was that Doc. "Stolen valor is a federal crime," Holloway said. Suddenly, his voice regaining its edge. Beatrice paused. She looked up. "Excuse me, that tattoo," Holloway said, his eyes narrowing. "You bought it. You think it makes you look tough. There were no women in the infantry clearing houses in Fallujah. You're a liar." Beatrice stared at him for a long, heavy silence. She set the needle down. "You think I'm lying? I think you're a fraud," Holloway said, gaining confidence. "And I'm going to expose you. I'm going to make sure everyone knows the head nurse at Oakhaven is wearing ink she didn't earn." Beatrice sighed. It was a sad, tired sound. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. "I really didn't want to do this, Commander. I just wanted to stitch you up and go home to my cat." She dialed a number. She put it on speaker. "Who are you calling?" Holloway demanded. "The Pentagon," Beatrice said. "Or more specifically, the private line of General Marcus. Oh wait, Marcus is banned," she muttered to herself. "General Arthur? No, he's retired." She scrolled. "Ah, General Stone. General Sailor Stone." Holloway froze. General Stone was the Commandant of the Marine Corps, the highest-ranking Marine in the United States. You don't know General Stone?" Holloway scoffed. The phone rang twice. Then a gruff, deep voice answered. "This is Stone." "Silas, it's B," Beatrice said casually. There was a pause on the line. Then the General's voice changed completely. It became warm, respectful, even affectionate. "B, Top Doc. Is that you? I haven't heard from you since the reunion. Is everything all right?" Holloway's jaw hit the floor. The silence in Examination Bay 3 was absolute, broken only by the hum of the overhead fluorescent lights and the distant, tinny voice of General Silas Stone coming from Beatrice's phone. Commander Brock Holloway stood frozen, his face a mask of pale shock. The arrogance that had armored him only moments ago had shattered, replaced by the primal fear of a man realizing he had just stepped on a landmine. "B." The General's voice came through again, louder this time, tinged with concern. "You went quiet. Is something wrong? Do I need to send MPs down there?" Beatrice held the phone steadily, her eyes never leaving Holloway's face. She watched the sweat bead on his forehead. She saw the way his Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed dryly. "No need for the MPs just yet. Silas?" Beatrice said, her tone conversational, as if she were discussing the weather. "I just ran into one of your boys, a Commander Brock Holloway. He seems to be under the impression that I'm practicing stolen valor." There was a pause on the line. A heavy, dangerous pause. "Holloway." The General's voice dropped an octave, losing all its warmth. It became the voice of the man who commanded the entire Marine Corps. "Put him on." Holloway shook his head frantically, his hands raising in a pathetic gesture of surrender. He mouthed the word "no," looking like a trapped animal. Beatrice didn't blink. She extended the phone toward him. "The Commandant gave you an order, Commander." Holloway took the phone as if it were a live grenade. His hands were trembling so badly he almost dropped it. He brought the device to his ear. "General," Holloway stammered. "Sir, this is Commander Holloway. I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" General Stone's voice was so loud, Beatrice could hear it without the speakerphone. "You are accusing Beatrice Connors of stolen valor. Do you have any idea who you are talking to?" "Son?" "Sir, she's working as a nurse and she has the unit ink," Halloway tried to explain, his voice weak. "I just thought—" "You thought wrong," Stone cut him off, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "That woman pulled me out of a burning Humvee in the middle of the Triangle of Death while taking fire from 3 directions. She kept me alive for 6 hours with nothing but a combat tourniquet and a prayer. She didn't just earn that ink, Halloway. She earned the right to have you stand at attention every time she walks into a room. She is a recipient of the Navy Cross and the Silver Star. She retired as a Master Chief Petty Officer before she decided to serve veterans in the VA, and you disrespected her." Halloway felt his knees buckle. Master Chief, Navy Cross. He was standing in front of living history, and he had treated her like a servant. "Sir, I didn't know," Halloway whispered. "I apologize. I will apologize to her immediately." "You're damn right you will," Stone growled. "But that's not the end of it. I'm looking at your file right now, Halloway. You're supposed to be in transit from Germany. Why are you at the Oakhaven VA in the middle of the night with a minor injury?" Halloway's eyes darted to Beatrice, panic flaring in his pupils. I had an accident, sir. Just getting patched up before the briefing." "An accident?" Stone repeated the suspicion had evident in his tone. "Put B back on." Halloway handed the phone back to Beatrice, his face grey. "I'm here, Silas," Beatrice said. "B, listen to me," the general said, his voice serious. "Halloway's unit just got back from a classified op in Syria. It went bad, very bad. We lost contact with one of his squads. Halloway claims he was extracted early due to an injury. If he's there with a scratch and my boys are missing, I need you to look at him. Really look at him." Beatrice's eyes narrowed. The warmth of the reunion vanished, replaced by the cold calculation of the combat medic. "I understand," she said softly. "I'll take a look. Give my love to Mary." "Watch your 6B, Stone warned. "Halloway is ambitious, and ambitious men do stupid things when they're cornered." The line went dead. Beatrice slipped the phone back into her pocket. She turned to the suture kit, put on a fresh pair of gloves, and looked at Halloway. The air in the room had shifted. It wasn't just a rude patient and a nurse anymore. It was an interrogation. "Sit down, Commander," Beatrice ordered. Halloway sat. He didn't argue. He looked defeated, but beneath the defeat, Beatrice saw something else flickering in his eyes. Desperation. And desperation was dangerous. "Stitch me up," Halloway said, his voice low. "Please. Just stitch me up so I can leave." Beatrice pulled the rolling stool closer. She grabbed the bottle of saline and began to clean the wound on his forearm. It was a jagged cut, about 3 inches long, nasty but superficial. "So," Beatrice said, her voice deceptively light as she irrigated the wound. "Syria. Rough country." Halloway flinched. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Stone told me," she lied. "He said you got pulled out early. That's a shame, leaving your men behind." "I didn't leave them." Halloway snapped, his defensive instincts flaring. "I was wounded. I was compromised. Protocol states that a commanding officer must be evacuated if he cannot function." "Right," Beatrice said. She leaned in closer to the wound. "Protocol." She picked up the needle driver. But she didn't start stitching. She stared at the edges of the cut. "Funny thing about this cut, Commander," she murmured. "What?" Halloway demanded. "It's from a piece of shrapnel. A mortar round hit the convoy." Beatrice looked up over her glasses. "Shrapnel tears. It shreds. It leaves burns and debris embedded in the tissue. It's messy." She poked the edge of the cut with her forceps. "This is clean," she said coldly. "Straight lines, even depth, no tearing at the margins, no powder burns, no debris." She looked him dead in the eye. "This looks like it was made with a very sharp, very sterile blade, like a combat knife, or a scalpel." Holloway jerked his arm back, his face twisting into a snarl. "Are you calling me a liar again?" "I'm calling you a coward," Beatrice said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You did this to yourself, didn't you? You cut your own arm so you could catch the first bird out of the hot zone and leave your squad to rot." Holloway stood up so fast the stool clattered to the floor. He towered over her, his hands balled into fists. The pretense of civility was gone. He was a cornered wolf, and he was baring his teeth. "You have no proof," he hissed, "and nobody will believe a washed-up nurse over a decorated commander. Now finish the job, or I will break your neck." Beatrice didn't move. She didn't flinch. She had stared down warlords and insurgents. A sweating, lying officer didn't scare her. But she knew the general was right. Holloway was dangerous because he had everything to lose. "Sit down," she repeated, her voice like steel. "I'll stitch you, but don't think this is over." Holloway sat breathing heavily. Beatrice worked quickly, her hands moving with the muscle memory of 10,000 procedures. She placed 6 neat stitches in his arm, tied off the knot, and snipped the thread. "Done," she said. "Tetanus shot is next." "Skip it," Holloway said, jumping up and rolling down his sleeve. "I'm leaving." "You need to sign discharge papers," Beatrice said, moving to the computer terminal in the corner of the room. "And I need to log the cause of injury." "Log it as combat trauma," Holloway ordered, buttoning his jacket. "And delete any notes about whatever crazy theories you have." Beatrice typed on the keyboard. She wasn't deleting anything. She was flagging his file. She typed patient presence with laceration inconsistent with reported history. Suspected self-inflicted wound to avoid duty. Request immediate inquiry. "I can't delete medical records, Commander," she said calmly. "It's a federal offense, but I'm sure your story will hold up to scrutiny." Holloway walked up behind her. He saw the reflection of the screen in the glass cabinet door. He saw the red flag icon. He grabbed the back of her head, slamming her face toward the desk. Beatrice caught herself with her hands just before impact, her glasses skewing on her face. "Delete it!" Holloway screamed. "Delete it now!" Suddenly, the curtain to the bay was ripped open. "Hey, it wasn't security. It was Lieutenant Silas Holloway's aide." He looked pale, holding a phone in his hand. "Sir!" "Stop!" Silas yelled. Holloway spun around, releasing Beatrice. "Get out, Silas. Wait in the car." "Sir, you need to hear this," Silas said, stepping into the room. He looked at Beatrice, then at the commander. "It's the extraction team. They found the squad." Holloway froze. "They found them. All of them." "No, sir," Silas said, his voice shaking. "Most of them are KIA, but they found one survivor. He was airlifted to Ramstein, then transferred here immediately because of the specialist lung unit." Holloway's face went white. "Here to Oakhaven." "Yes, sir," Silas said. "He just landed. They're bringing him through the trauma bay right now." Beatrice straightened up, fixing her glasses. Her mind raced. The young man she had saved earlier, the one with the tension pneumothorax, the one with the Semper Fi tattoo. "The John Doe," Beatrice whispered. Holloway looked at her, terror dawning in his eyes. "What did you say?" Holloway asked. "The kid I saved right before you," Beatrice said, stepping around the desk. "Collapsed lung, road rash, no ID. He didn't come from a motorcycle accident, did he? He came from the airfield. He was just a biker," Holloway insisted, but his voice cracked. He was wearing a t-shirt, Beatrice corrected him, her mind piecing it together. But underneath, he had blast injuries. I saw the patterns on his skin. I treated him for a collapsed lung, but I didn't check for shrapnel because we were rushing. She pushed past Halloway and ran out of the room. "Wait!" Halloway yelled, chasing after her. Beatrice sprinted down the hallway toward the ICU. She had to get to that boy. If he was the survivor from Halloway's unit, he was the only witness. He knew the truth. And if Halloway got to him first, that boy wouldn't survive the night. She burst into the ICU. The lights were dimmed. Monitors beeped rhythmically. She found the bed. Bed 4. The young man was intubated, sedated, his chest rising and falling with the help of a machine. Beatrice grabbed his chart. Patient John Doe, admitted 2,200 hours, injuries consistent with high-velocity impact. She looked at the boy's face. Beneath the bruises and the swelling, he looked like a child, maybe 21. Beatrice Halloway stormed into the ICU. Lieutenant Silas and Sergeant Reed right behind him. The night shift nurses looked up in alarm. "Get away from him," Halloway ordered, marching toward the bed. "That is my Marine. I am taking custody of him. We are transferring him to Walter Reed." "He is unstable," Beatrice shouted, placing herself between Halloway and the bed. "You move him, now you kill him." "That's an order!" Halloway roared. "Reed, Silas, grab the gurney." The two younger officers hesitated. They looked at the boy hooked up to the machines. They looked at the terrified nurses. "Sir, he looks bad," Reed said nervously. "Maybe we should wait." "I gave you an order, Sergeant," Halloway screamed. "He is a witness to a classified operation. He is a security risk. We are moving him now." Halloway shoved Beatrice aside with enough force to send her stumbling into a crash cart. He grabbed the rails of the bed and unlocked the brakes. "No!" Beatrice yelled. She scrambled to her feet. Suddenly the boy in the bed moved. His eyes snapped open. They were wide-dilated, filled with the terror of the battlefield. He gagged on the intubation tube. The alarms on the monitor began to scream. High heart rate, high pressure. He saw Halloway. The boy's hand shot out, grabbing Halloway's wrist. It was a weak grip, but it was fueled by pure adrenaline. The boy stared at Halloway, and even with the tube in his mouth, the message was clear. Pure, unadulterated hatred. Halloway tried to shake him off. "Let go, Marine." Beatrice lunged forward, not at Halloway, but at the sedation controls. She needed to calm the boy down before he tore his stitches or stroked out. "Help me!" she screamed to the other nurses. "Code Grey security to ICU!" But Halloway was panicking. He saw the look in the boy's eyes. He knew that if this kid could talk, Halloway was going to prison for life. Halloway reached into his jacket. He pulled out a syringe he had swiped from the open trauma cart in Bay 3. "He's seizing!" Halloway yelled, lying through his teeth. "I'm administering a sedative." "Don't you touch him!" Beatrice screamed. She saw the label on the syringe Halloway was holding. Succinylcholine, a paralytic. If he gave that to a patient who was already struggling to breathe, it would stop his heart in seconds. Halloway raised the needle toward the boy's IV line. Beatrice didn't think. She didn't calculate. She moved with the speed of the woman who had survived the Battle of Fallujah. She grabbed a heavy metal oxygen tank standing near the wall. Swinging it like a baseball bat, she aimed not for Halloway's head that would kill him, but for his arm. Clang! The steel tank connected with Halloway's forearm, the one she had just stitched up. There was a sickening crunch of bone. Halloway screamed a high-pitched wailing sound. The syringe flew out of his hand, skittering across the tile floor. He collapsed to his knees, clutching his shattered arm. "My arm! You broke my arm!" Halloway shrieked. Lieutenant Silas and Sergeant Reed drew their sidearms. "Freeze, drop the tank!" Silas yelled, aiming his pistol at Beatrice. The ICU went dead silent. Beatrice stood over Halloway, breathing hard, the oxygen tank still in her hand. She looked down the barrel of the lieutenant's gun. "Put it down, son," Beatrice said, her voice shaking but defiant. "Look at what your commander was trying to do. Look at the syringe." Silas glanced at the floor. He saw the vial. "That's a paralytic," Beatrice said. "He wasn't trying to sedate him. He was trying to execute him." Silas looked at Halloway, who was writhing on the floor, weeping in pain. Then he looked at the boy in the bed, who was watching them with wide, terrified eyes. "Sir," Silas asked, his voice trembling, "is that true?" "She's crazy," Halloway sobbed. "Shoot her." "That's an order, shoot her." The doors to the ICU burst open again. But it wasn't hospital security. It was a group of 4 men. They were older, dressed in leather motorcycle vests, rain dripping from their shoulders. They looked like trouble. But Beatrice looked at them and smiled. It was the local VFW motorcycle club. The Old Guard. Earl, the Vietnam vet from the waiting room, was in the lead. He wasn't shaking anymore. He was holding a tire iron. "We heard there was a problem," Earl growled, stepping into the room. Behind him stood 3 other massive men, Gulf War vets, who spent their days volunteering at the hospital. They saw the guns. They didn't care. "You boys better holster those pea shooters," Earl said, stepping between Beatrice and the lieutenant. "Unless you want to explain to God why you shot a nurse in a room full of veterans." Silas looked at Earl, then at Beatrice, then at his screaming commander. He slowly lowered his weapon. He holstered it. "Stand down, Reed," Silas said quietly. "But, sir," Reed started. "I said, stand down," Silas barked. He looked at Halloway with disgust. "I'm not dying for this coward." Beatrice dropped the oxygen tank. She rushed to the boy's side, checking his vitals. "It's okay," she whispered to him, smoothing his hair. "You're safe. Nobody is going to hurt you." She looked up at Earl. "Watch the door, Earl. Nobody comes in. Nobody goes out until the real police get here." "Yes, ma'am," Earl said, crossing his arms. Halloway was still on the floor, cradling his broken arm. "You're dead," he spat at Beatrice. "You assaulted a superior officer. You'll rot in Leavenworth." Beatrice walked over to him. She knelt down, bringing her face close to his. She wasn't the kind, grandmotherly nurse anymore. She was the devil's doc. "You better hope I go to jail, Commander," she whispered. "Because if I'm free, I'm going to make it my life's mission to ensure every person in the Pentagon knows what you did. I'm going to dig up every file, every report, every witness. I will strip that rank off your collar if I have to use my own teeth." She stood up. "Now shut up and bleed quietly. You're disturbing my patients." Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. The cavalry was coming. But for Halloway, the war was already lost. The young Marine in the bed. Private Caleb Vance watched Beatrice with tears in his eyes. He couldn't speak, but he reached out his hand again. Beatrice took it. He squeezed her hand. "Thank you." But the night wasn't over. Halloway was broken, but men like him had connections. Men like him had lawyers. And as the police rushed in to handcuff everyone, Beatrice knew the hardest battle was just starting. She had exposed a monster, but monsters have a way of fighting back from the dark. The fluorescent lights of the 4th Precinct interrogation room were specifically designed to make a person feel small. They buzzed with a low, headache-inducing hum that seemed to vibrate inside Beatrice's skull. She had been sitting there for 6 hours. Her hands were no longer cuffed, but her wrists still ached from the metal. They had taken her shoelaces and her belt standard procedure for a violent offender. The door opened, and Detective Miller walked in. He was a tired-looking man with coffee stains on his tie, caught in the middle of a military-civilian jurisdiction nightmare. He dropped a thick file onto the metal table. "Miss Connors?" Miller sighed, sinking into the chair opposite her. "We have a problem." "I imagine we do," Beatrice said, her voice raspy. She hadn't had water since the ICU. "Considering I stopped a murder and I'm the one in the cage." "That's your version," Miller said. "Commander Holloway's version is quite different. He claims the patient, Private Caleb Hayes, was having a seizure. He claims he was administering emergency aid. And then you, suffering from what his lawyers are calling an episode of PTSD-induced hysteria, attacked him with a deadly weapon. You shattered his ulna and radius. He's in surgery right now." Beatrice laughed humorlessly. "PTSD-induced hysteria. That's creative." "They have statements, Beatrice," Miller warned. "From his aides. Sergeant Reed stated that you were aggressive from the moment they walked in. They're painting a picture of a bitter, unstable veteran who snapped." "And Lieutenant Silas?" Beatrice asked sharply. "What did he say?" Miller hesitated. He looked down at his notes. "Lieutenant Silas has declined to give a statement yet. He's claiming Fifth Amendment rights." Beatrice nodded slowly. Silas, the young officer who had lowered his gun. He was the weak link. He had a conscience. "Detective, check the syringe," Beatrice said. "I told the officers to bag it." "We did," Miller said. "But here's the twist. The lab report came back an hour ago. The syringe contained saline." Beatrice's blood ran cold. "What saline?" Miller repeated. "Salt water. Harmless." Beatrice stared at the wall. Holloway was smarter than she thought. He had switched them. Or he had carried a decoy. If the syringe was harmless, her defense crumbled. She had broken a high-ranking officer's arm for trying to hydrate a patient. "He switched it," Beatrice whispered. "When he fell. Or Reed did it before the cops secured the room." "I can't prove that," Miller said gently. "Beatrice, the district attorney, is talking about charges: assault with a deadly weapon, battery, obstruction of justice. And the military is breathing down our necks. They want to court-martial you, but since you're a civilian now, they're pushing for federal charges." The door buzzed and opened again. This time, it wasn't a cop. It was General Silas Stone. He wasn't wearing his dress blues. He was wearing field fatigues, the sleeves rolled up, looking ready for a brawl. He walked into the small room, and the air pressure seemed to change. Detective Miller stood up instinctively. "General Stone," Miller stammered. "I wasn't told." "Leave us," Stone ordered. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. Miller grabbed his file and scrambled out of the room. Stone looked at Beatrice. He didn't offer pity. He offered respect. He pulled out the chair and sat down. "You look like hell, top doc," Stone said softly. "You should see the other guy." Beatrice managed a weak smile. "I did," Stone said grimly. "I visited Holloway in the VIP recovery wing. He's already giving interviews, playing the wounded hero. He's got a senator on speed dial B. He's spinning this as an attack on the military by a failing VA system." "The syringe was swapped, Silas," Beatrice said, leaning forward. "He was going to use succinylcholine. I saw the label." "I believe you," Stone said. "But proving it is another matter. Halloway has cleaned house. His files from the Syria op are sealed under national security. The extraction team has been reassigned to Alaska. He's burying the truth. And the boy? Beatrice asked. Private Hayes. Stone's face darkened. He's alive. But he's in a medically induced coma. Halloway's doctors claimed the stress of the attack destabilized him. They put him under. As long as he's asleep, Halloway is safe. Beatrice slammed her hand on the table. He's going to kill him, Silas. If Hayes wakes up, Halloway burns. Halloway will make sure he never wakes up. An embolism or cardiac arrest in the middle of the night. Stone nodded. I know. That's why I have 2 Force Recon Marines sitting outside Hayes's door right now. I told them if anyone other than you or me tries to enter that room, they are to shoot to kill. Beatrice exhaled, her shoulders slumping. So what now? I go to prison? No, Stone said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I'm calling in a marker. I spoke to the Secretary of the Navy. We are invoking Article 32, a preliminary hearing. But we're doing it fast, and we're doing it public. If Halloway wants a fight, we'll give him one. But B, you need to know what you're up against. Halloway isn't just a coward. He's a golden boy. His father is a defense contractor. If you miss, you lose everything. Your pension, your nursing license, your freedom. Beatrice looked at her tattooed arm. She thought about the young boys she had zipped into body bags in Fallujah. She thought about the fear in Caleb Hayes's eyes. I don't miss, Beatrice said. The twist. 3 days later, the hearing began. It wasn't a standard courtroom. It was held in a secure conference hall at the nearby naval base, converted into a tribunal. The room was packed. Press, military brass, and a surprising number of civilians, the Old Guard biker club, had rallied standing outside the gates with signs supporting Nurse Bear. Halloway sat at the plaintiff's table, his arm in an elaborate sling, looking solemn and dignified. His lawyer was a shark named Sterling, a man who cost $1,000 an hour. Beatrice sat with a public defender and a JAG lawyer assigned by Stone. The first 2 hours were a massacre. Sterling tore apart Beatrice's character. He brought up old disciplinary reports from the hospital, times Beatrice had argued with doctors or bent rules to help patients. He painted her as a loose cannon. Then Halloway took the stand. He was convincing. He spoke of the chaos of the ER, his concern for his subordinate, and the shock of being attacked by a confused woman. He even squeezed out a tear when talking about his concern for Beatrice's mental health. I don't blame her, Halloway said softly into the microphone. War leaves scars on all of us. I just want her to get the help she needs. The tribunal panel 3 high-ranking officers looked sympathetic. It was looking bad. Then it was the defense's turn. Beatrice's JAG lawyer, Captain Ross, stood up. We call Lieutenant James Silas to the stand. A ripple of shock went through the room. Halloway's head snapped toward the back of the room. He hadn't expected this. Silas walked in. He wasn't wearing his dress uniform. He was in civvies jeans and a button-down shirt. He looked toured like he hadn't slept in a week. He took the oath. He sat down. He wouldn't look at Halloway. Lieutenant, Captain Ross began. You were present in the ER. Tell us about the syringe. Objection, Sterling shouted. Speculation. The police report confirmed it was saline. Overruled, the lead judge said. Answer the question. Silas took a deep breath. Commander Halloway carries a personal medical kit. It's not standard issue. Before we entered the hospital, he told me to hold on to a secondary pouch. He said it was backup supplies. And did you look in the pouch? Yes. Silas whispered. After the incident, when everyone was distracted. And what did you find? Silas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, sealed plastic bag. Inside was a vial. I found the saline vial, Silas said. The seal was broken. He had filled the syringe with the saline before we went into the ICU. He planned to swap it. The room erupted. Holloway stood up. He's lying. He's disgruntled because I wrote him up for insubordination. Sit down, Commander, the judge roared. Lieutenant. Ross continued, his voice rising. Why would the commander want to harm Private Hayes? Silas looked up. Tears were streaming down his face. Because of Syria. We weren't ambushed. The commander, he panicked. We were taking light fire. He ordered an airstrike on our own position to cover his retreat. He called it danger close. He sacrificed the squad to create a diversion so he could get to the extraction point. A gasp tore through the room. This wasn't just assault anymore. This was a war crime. Hayes was the radio man, Silas sobbed. Hayes heard the order. He tried to cancel it. Holloway shot the radio. Then he left them to die. Holloway was turning purple. This is fantasy. Where is the proof? Where is the recording? The radio was destroyed. The radio was destroyed. A new voice boomed from the back of the hall. Everyone turned. The doors swung open. General Stone stood there, and pushing a wheelchair next to him was Beatrice's colleague Jenny. In the wheelchair sat Private Caleb Hayes. He was pale, hooked up to a portable oxygen tank, but he was awake, and he was holding a small, battered device. Private Hayes, General Stone announced. Permission to approach the tribunal. Granted, the judge said, looking stunned. Hayes wheeled himself forward. He stopped right in front of Holloway. The commander looked at the boy he had tried to kill, and for the first time, true terror filled his eyes. This, Hayes rasped, holding up the device, is a body-worn audio recorder, standard issue for recon radio operators. It records independently of the comms unit. It has a localized hard drive. He pressed a button. Static filled the quiet courtroom. Then sounds of gunfire. Then Holloway's voice, crystal clear. Eagle 1, this is Holloway. Call in the strike. Coordinates 34 north, 12 east. Immediate effect. Then Hayes's voice, young and panicked. Sir. That's on us. The squad is still in the kill box. You'll wipe us out. Holloway's voice again. I don't care. I need smoke and debris. Cover my exit. That is an order. A gunshot. The sound of metal shattering. Then silence. The recording ended. The silence in the tribunal hall was heavier than any artillery barrage. Every Marine in the room was staring at Holloway with a look of pure, unadulterated revulsion. To sacrifice men is a tragedy. To kill them to save your own skin is the ultimate sin. Holloway slumped into his chair. His lawyer, Sterling, slowly began to pack up his briefcase. He closed it, stood up, and walked away from the table, leaving Holloway alone. Commander Holloway, the judge said, his voice trembling with anger. You are hereby stripped of all rank and privileges, effective immediately. You are remanded to the custody of the Master-at-Arms. You will face a general court-martial for cowardice murder and attempted murder. May God have mercy on your soul, because the United States Marine Corps will not. 2 MPs marched forward. They didn't be gentle. They grabbed Holloway by his good arm and his broken arm. He screamed as they yanked him up, but nobody flinched. They dragged him out of the room, his feet dragging on the floor, a weeping, broken disgrace. The aftermath. The rain had finally stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds outside the Oakhaven VA. Beatrice walked out the front doors of the Naval Tribunal building. She took a deep breath of fresh air. It tasted like freedom. B. She turned. Caleb Hayes was sitting in his wheelchair by the waiting transport van, General Stone standing beside him. Beatrice walked over. She knelt down so she was eye level with the young Marine. "You okay, Caleb?" she asked. Caleb looked at her. He reached out and touched the tattoo on her arm, the skull and the caduceus. "You saved me," Caleb said. "Twice. That's what docs do." Beatrice smiled, her eyes crinkling. "I'm going to be discharged," Caleb said. "Medical. My lungs. They won't let me stay in the infantry." "There are other ways to serve," Beatrice said. "You're a fighter, Caleb. The world needs fighters." General Stone stepped forward. He placed a hand on Beatrice's shoulder. "The charges against you have been dropped with prejudice," Stone said. "And the VA? Well, let's just say they've had a sudden change of heart about your employment status. You're not just the head nurse anymore, B. I pulled some strings. You're now the director of veteran patient advocacy for the entire district. No more red tape. You run the show." Beatrice laughed. "You mean I get to yell at administrators professionally? I couldn't think of anyone better suited for the job." Stone grinned. Beatrice looked at the parking lot. The old guard was there. Earl was revving his Harley. When they saw her, 50 bikers raised their fists in solidarity. She looked back at Caleb. "He's gone, Caleb," she said. "Halloway. He's never going to hurt anyone again." Caleb nodded. A weight seemed to lift off his narrow shoulders. "Thank you, Doc." "Call me B," she said. She stood up, smoothing her scrub top, which she had insisted on wearing under her jacket. "Now, if you gentlemen will excuse me, my shift starts in an hour, and I have a feeling the waiting room is full." She walked away, her limp barely noticeable, her head held high. A hero not because of the medals she kept in a drawer or the tattoo on her skin, but because when the storm came, she was the one who refused to move. She was the devil's doc, and she was on duty. And that is how a forgotten nurse with a boring job took down one of the most powerful men in the military. It's a reminder that true strength isn't about the rank on your collar or the volume of your voice. It's about character. It's about the quiet courage to stand between the innocent and the wolves, even when you're standing alone. Commander Halloway thought he was untouchable, but he forgot the most important lesson of the Cor Semper Fidelis. Always faithful. Beatrice Connors kept the faith, and in the end, justice was served. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that heroes are everywhere. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story of karma, justice, and survival. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.